A little life. Let's go. Hello everyone. Welcome back to the channel. My name is Andre and I'm your bookworm, and today we have another book review. Today we are deviating a bit from our usual fantasy and science fiction because we are reviewing A Little Life by Hanya Yanagihara, which is a contemporary fiction novel. And why this change of heart? Well, this book was recommended by some people as a must read because it was really good. And since I was getting a bit of a book reading slump with fantasy and science fiction, I decided to just change a bit the palette and have something different, and I'm very glad that I did. Now, what do we know about this book in specific? This book was initially published in 2015, so 10 years ago. It's a contemporary fiction novel, and at the time of publishing, it was nominated for more than 10 awards, which just from this can tell you a lot about how this book was appreciated by the masses. This is not the debut work of this author. This is actually the second novel published, and that's just this. Take this into account when I talk about writing style, because boy oh boy, this author has such a mastery in terms of writing, but I'll get into it soon. Anyways, on Goodreads, this book has over 895,000 ratings. Yeah, you heard me well, almost 1 million ratings. And again, this just shows how famous this book was when it was published or until now, and just shows you like how big it got. But I mean, you could guess that already by the amount of awards it has, or by the amount of awards it got nominated to. In terms of average score, it stands on 4.28 out of 5. Now, I don't know if this is good or bad in terms of the contemporary fiction spheres. For me, it seems quite good. I'm trying to compare it more or less with the fantasy scores of 4.28, quite good. But since I don't know, I don't read much contemporary fiction, let's just assume that this is a good sign. Now, before we jump into our actual review, we have one housekeeping item, which is the synopsis. I'm going to narrate it to you. If you don't want to listen to it, you can just skip to the next timestamp. You'll jump right into our categories. Otherwise, if you're keen to know what this book is about, you're curious, stick and I shall narrate it to you. All right, I think I've given enough time for you to jump if you don't want to have any spoilers, so let's go. A Little Life follows 4 college classmates, broke, adrift, and buoyed only by their friendship and ambition, as they move to New York in search of fame and fortune. While their relationships, which are tinged by addiction, success, and pride, deepen over decades, the men are held together by their devotion to the brilliant, enigmatic Jude, a man scarred by an unspeakable childhood trauma, a hymn to brotherly bonds, and a masterful depiction of love in the 21st century. Hanya Yanagihara's stunning novel is about the families we are born into and those that we make for ourselves. Alright, with the synopsis done, I can jump into our categories, but just before I do that, let me forewarn you about the triggers of this book. This book has a lot of heavy topics, and some of them very sensitive, so please do check the trigger warnings for this novel before you jump into it if you are sensitive to some of these triggers. And now that I've given you that warning, let's jump into plot, which is our first category. Okay, the plot of this book is heavy, but like very heavy. And if you think I'm overstating it, think again. This book will hit you with some unexpected punches that feel like a truck hitting you, and it can come quite often. And by often, I mean like sometimes in between 50 pages. In this book, we follow most of the time the POV of Jude, which is mentioned in the synopsis, and we follow his present time, and sometimes we see some of his flashbacks. But at the same time, we also follow a few other characters always related somehow with Jude. And honestly, I don't know what it would be better if to just have the POVs from Jude always being in Jude's head, or the way it is the book at the moment, because there doesn't seem to be a good answer, a good outcome out of it. There's always some negative or some sad outcome from this, so I think in the end the author chose well to do it in this way. And don't get me wrong, this is not like the book has twists or sadness just for the sake of it. It all makes sense, it's super coherent with the story, especially with the characters, and some of them you do see them coming from afar, while others hit you like a truck, like I mentioned, and it's very unexpected but always coherent. And every single time it will hit your heart very deeply. I remember being 1/4 of the book through and asking some of the friends that I have read this book what did they think of it and how heavy it was, and once they figure out I was only 1/4 of the way through, they were like, oh boy, you still have a lot to go through, you're only at the edge of it, which made me really scared, but at the same time really keen to keep reading it. This is not the usual book I'm used to, in the sense we have multiple plot lines, overarching arcs between books. It's only one single plot line. We follow mostly Jude and his life. But I think that was done brilliantly. It gives simplicity to the book because this book does not need complexity. And because of that, I have to give this category a 5 out of 5. I could complain that towards the last, the last quarter more or less, the plot seems to become a bit repetitive in the sense that it's disaster after disaster. But at the same time, again, It is coherent with the world, so I don't really feel like complaining about it because I was still enjoying reading it, even though I was starting to notice this pattern. Okay, let's talk about characters, which, I mean, this category has to be the gem of this book. There's no other questions about it. And that's because all of the characters felt real. It felt like I could connect with them, I could relate to them in some way, especially when we would explore their point of views independently, when we had different point of views. Even when they weren't doing the best of things, they weren't having the best of actions, you could still relate and connect with them somehow, empathize, simply because of the way they were written, and again, because they felt three-dimensional, deep, with their own goals, aspirations, fears, and traumas. And you couldn't help but think this could be a person I know. I mean, Hanya Yanagihara writes people more alive than some people that I know. They feel more real. And if that weren't enough, just the relationships between the characters, again, felt so real. I could identify myself having relationships with people just like that, and I could understand well how other people would see themselves in this book, because these relationships have their own struggles, their own fears, their own accomplishments, with secrets, happy moments, all that real relationships have. I mean, I think you will find yourself feeling happy when two friends achieve something and they're celebrating, as well as you'll feel sad when two friends have a fallout and they don't talk anymore. And I think it is important to note that the exploration of Jude's condition never feels exploratory, that never feels predatory or pitiful. It just feels like someone who could potentially go that path. That is how they could potentially feel. It seems really possible, doesn't mean that it's the only way. But I mean, this is also part of the writing style category, so I'll stop for here and just say that I'm giving a 5 out of 5 for this category, and then we move on to world building. Now let's move on to world building, which is a category quite hard to analyze in this book, because with science fiction we have all the technologies that can be developed, the potential of how the universe would be if humans have explored beyond that. And with fantasy, we have the new worlds, the magics that can be explored. And so this category is very present in those subgenres. In contemporary fiction, not so much. I'm looking more on the ambience. How does the book make me feel in terms of where the characters are situated, the cities, they explore other places, even their houses. And okay, that most of this story is set in New York, I still think that the author was able to depict New York well, and also depict the houses that the characters were living in as worlds of themselves, because they really felt pivotal to how the characters would feel, how they would interact with each other. And I think with the author playing around with flashbacks and with other POVs, we get some sense of the history between the characters, but also the history and the ambience of other places, as if they weren't the exact same place, but in the present or in the past, if you get what I mean. And like I mentioned, every place that Jude visits feels like a new place, or he feels like you will be able to influence him and his journey throughout the story. So although it is a score that doesn't mean exactly the same thing you would for a fantasy or science fiction novel, I'm giving this category a 5 out of 5, because every place felt real, it was well described, it got that ambience that I keep mentioning, and I could imagine it perfectly in my head. Okay, second last we have writing style, and like I mentioned, this was the first work I've read from Hanya Yanagihara, so I didn't know what to expect regarding their writing style. I mean, I was surprised by the positive. I think Hanya's writing is like a poem. It guides you through with a rhythm, playing line by line, playing with your emotions, where she takes them through a journey where you completely lose control of them and you just surrender, and you end up finding parts of yourself that you did not know you had. Even though it is a contemporary novel, and you might be right in the sense that there is no action, so it might be considered slow, believe me, Hanya Yanagihara knows how to build tension in a book. And all of that without one inkling of violence. Although there is also some violence in this book, so that doesn't mean that means that there isn't no violence, there is, but some of the tension is not built upon that violence. And for me, some of the most tense moments were exactly those moments where there is no violence, just characters speaking to each other, saying things that maybe they will regret later on, but that they are super powerful and super hurtful as well. I mean, of course, we cannot talk about this category without talking about the messages and themes that this book has. I mean, fun, family, hatred, loathing, self-pity, self-loathing and hatred, but also compassion and empathy and love. Like, so many different things are explored in this book, and all of them done brilliantly. And they're explored in a very nuanced way. There's not one time where you feel like you're being preached about a specific theme, but they all are very nuanced, and sometimes the same topic can be explored differently with different POVs, so you do get a big overview of everything. And like I mentioned, in the character category, I think Hara did an absolute great job at exploring these themes without feeling exploratory. It doesn't feel like she's just taking people's disgraces and making a story out of it. I think the author is showing this point of view as real as it can get, trying to show how bad someone can get and how it can be really, really difficult to ask for help or to help someone that is in that state. So in summary, I think this category could not be anything less than a 5 out of 5. And for our last category is enjoyment, which again, it's a weird category to analyze here in this book, considering this book is so heavy, so depressing, very, very sad. So me saying that I'm enjoying it feels weird because I did enjoy it, but not in the happy way. I was very sad while reading this book, but I was thoroughly enjoying it. I mean, several times I had to stop reading it because it was hitting really hard. Sometimes I had tears in my eyes as I was reading it because it was so heartfelt, it was so emotional, but I think that means that I was enjoying the book a lot. I was stopping, but I was stopping to not just bawl my eyes out, but I was still wanting to read more. And I mean, several times I asked, how much longer will this go for? Because how can a character suffer this much? How can they have so many issues throughout their lives? But I think the author is excellent at making you hope for a good outcome, because we would have something that would be really bad, and then as we keep reading, things seem to be improving slowly, you seem to be gaining some hope, and then boom, you get some other disaster and you feel horrible again. But I think that's the beauty and the rawness of this book. I think that's really what should be appreciated, this duality of life. There's not always happy moments or always sad moments. There's a mix of both of these things throughout life. So for this category, it's going to be a 5 out of 5. And that leads us to the end of our review. Just as a refresher, we have 5 for plot, characters, world building, writing style, and enjoyment, which gives us a final score of, you guessed it, a 5 out of 5. So, okay, this was a big surprise because I was not expecting, when I picked up this book, this contemporary fiction book that I never read contemporary fiction, for me to love this book so much as I did. But I guess that's the beauty of reading different things. Sometimes you end up hitting something that is gold without you knowing it. And if you haven't tried different things, then you wouldn't know. You would always be circling around the same spheres without knowing all the potential that is outside. So that is definitely my recommendation. Go read this book. Go read something outside of your spheres of comfort, and maybe you'll find something that you really, really enjoy. And I mean, of course, I think highly of this book compared to the Goodreads average person, considering I gave a 5 and the Goodreads is 4.28. But I do think this book knows how to explore very sensitive topics. And I think a lot of people would identify with any of the characters that exist in this book. And even if slightly, they would be able to understand some others that have been passed through their lives. So yeah, I definitely recommend you read it. And if you have read it already, then comment down below, what did you think of it? Do you hate it? Do you love it? That you hate it? Tell me. And if you're new, don't forget to subscribe, like the content, and I shall be seeing you on Thursdays and Sundays, okay? See you soon.